Welcome to the Board of Education meeting for Weld County School District 6 on this, the 10th day of August 2020. This meeting will now come to order. Please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Crane, oh, there you are, way down there. Will you call the roll for us, please?
Mr. Hafley?
Present.
Mrs. Mash?
Present.
Mr. Matthews?
Present.
Mrs. Mueller?
Present.
Ms. Pappas?
Present.
Mrs. Solis?
Present.
Mr. Talley?
Present.
7 members present.
Thank you, Ms. Crane. Well, this is our first board meeting of the school year for 2020 and 2021. This is always an exciting time for us, and this year is no exception. We have been missing our students for a number of months and are excited to get them back, and I would say that is true for every teacher in the district, for our administrators in this district, for our central administrators, and for this Board of Education. We are excited, but I would say we are also anxious, and this has felt like a heavy month with many heavy decisions that have been made by our administration and our Board of Education. And we are anxious, and it would be dishonest to say anything else. We're a Board of Education who are teachers and parents. A number of us have children in this district, several different schools, elementary school and middle school and high school. Some of us even have children who are teaching in school, and so we are a board of parents and teachers, and we feel the weight of what's about to happen, and the uncertainty and the anxiety as much as anybody, because the children that we send back to school are our own children. The teachers that we send back to into classrooms are some of our dearest friends. And it has been an anxious month. And we have listened to a lot of opinions. And there are a few things that I certainly would hope everybody understands. And we received an email today that said that the board should choose child safety over economics. And that statement doesn't really appreciate the dilemma before us, because it's not about child safety or economics. It's about child safety or child safety. And the decisions that our administration has been making and the decisions that we have made as a board are in the interest of child safety. And I wish we could be more certain than we are. I wish we knew more about this virus than we do. I wish we could know for sure that no one would ever bring this virus into one of our schools, and that no one would ever contract this virus in one of our schools. And I would love as a parent to know for sure that it wouldn't be my child. But we can't be terribly certain about the virus. But we have to weigh what we don't know about this virus and some of the possible risk against the certainties that we do know, the things that we know will happen if we were to go in person, remote and online exclusively. Because what we know happens if we were to go in person, or rather remote, is that some of our children won't eat as well. And not a few, but a percentage. Some of our children who are in abusive and neglectful situations won't have those situations reported. Some of our children who are struggling with mental health issues and who are experiencing depression, don't have the resources that they need. Some of our children who education presents the best hope for their future. Public education is the absolute best hope for what they want in life. We know that they will fall behind, and some of them may never catch up. And so I hope, whether you agree or disagree with the decisions that have been made, that you understand that we're a board that's invested in the health of our students, and that we make every decision about what is best for the safety of our students and the education of our students. With that, I think we will move on to the next portion of our meeting. And the next portion is our public participation. And we just this year are dividing up our public participation. And I'll give you just a brief explanation on why we're doing that, because we love for people to come to this board and to speak to us about the things that people care about, but in the interest of everybody present, in the interest of efficient board meetings, we want to make sure that we're getting information that we need ahead of decisions. If there's something on the agenda, we want to hear that ahead of time. So if you're here tonight and you want to speak on the subject of school reopening, we want to hear what you have to say ahead of the meeting. But if you're here and you've got some ideas about graduation and how that could be improved for next year, and we're not really dealing with that tonight, we're going to request and actually require that you wait till the very end of the meeting, and we'll listen to your thoughts and your ideas at that point. And so everybody will have 2 minutes per speaker, and the board welcomes the comments of community members and has dedicated a portion of each business meeting agenda to provide an opportunity for the community to present brief comments or pose questions to the board related to the items that are listed on the agenda. A separate time at the end of the meeting provides an opportunity for the community to present brief comments and pose questions to the board on other items relating to the Greeley-Evans School District 6. People wishing to address the board are asked to complete the public participation form by 12 o'clock p.m. on the day of a scheduled meeting. Speakers will be heard in the order in which they signed up to speak. Written testimony or speaker handouts must be submitted to our board secretary, Ms. Crane, not to individual board members. And this part I want to make sure that everybody hears very clearly. This board is committed to providing a safe environment where all members of the school community are treated with dignity and respect, and we expect all speakers to exercise their speech rights responsibly. And with that, our first speaker tonight is Ms. April Kramer. So Ms. Kramer, if you'll come to the podium. And for those watching at home, it may take a little longer than normal for our speakers to come to the podium because we can't all fit into this room safely.
So President Matthews, I'm just wondering if Ms. Myers might work with our Chief of Security to queue the folks up in the order that they are to speak so that they are here in the room. There are open seats in the room, so there is not reason to have people waiting and being brought down from the overflow space as we've not yet filled the room. Thank you.
Ms. Kramer, you will have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is April Kramer. I've taught 4th grade at Maplewood Elementary for the last 7 years. This year, I took the opportunity to teach online. My concerns for students going back to school in person, going back to in-person learning are still the same. Just as we prepare our students for fire drills, tornadoes, and lockdowns, we need to prepare for the grief and fear that will come with returning to buildings to learn. Teachers need quality grief training. We are such an important part of students' daily lives. They will ask us questions, and they will be fearful of this virus that currently kills. We need to be prepared to answer those questions knowledgeably. This decision to bring students back into buildings has presented us with numerous unknowns and possible outcomes. The negative outcomes of illness and death are more than we have been trained to respond to. Those are the extremes, of course. It's the fear of those outcomes that we require training for. I'd be foolish to think that online students will not have concerns for their friends in school, their past teachers, and their own families. The what ifs we have to respond to for emergency drills are intense enough, but COVID is everywhere for our students. Adding grief counselor to our jobs is only appropriate if we are all trained to answer with educated information and proper counseling. If we try to freelance this, our students will not feel safe. The point of bringing them back will be lost. Professional training backed by reliable information is necessary to teach our students and make them feel safe. We cannot wait for tragedy. We need to be prepared for the worst. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Kramer. Next person who has signed up to speak is, and I'm sorry for mispronouncing this, Ms. Nokel? Knuckle, okay. Thank you, Ms. Knuckle. You'll have 2 minutes.
All right. Good evening. I'll be speaking quickly. I have a lot to say. I'd like to begin by saying that I do not discount the time and effort that has been put into creating this plan. I know that this is not an easy decision and that there is no one solution that will make everybody happy. Normally, I love this time of year. There is so much hope and promise at the beginning of school. But this year, it is clear that we should not be going back face to face. The science tells us that Hispanics and African Americans are more likely to develop severe COVID symptoms. Our student body is 62% Hispanic and African American. New research is indicating that children spread COVID more efficiently than adults, and there's a link between COVID and multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children. This is the science that we are ignoring or brushing under the rug. And is that the message we want to send to our kids, that we turn our backs on science when it doesn't fit into our plans? At my school, we have spent hours using the district expectations to comb through our day from start to finish, identifying everything that we need to change. Every time that we talk, we think of something new. At the end of the day on Friday, after spending days discussing protocols, the last thing we talked about was where students would hang their coats and backpacks. Something that simple. I have been proud to say that I am District 6, and I have voted for some of you, and I have had confidence that at the end of the day, you would make the right decision, and that you would value our lives, and I still have hope that you will do that. A superintendent recently said, "In the end, it will be impossible to know if we overreacted or did too much, but it will be quite apparent if we underreacted and did too little." I urge you to consider this statement. If we underreact or do too little, it could destroy the lives of many in our school community, including those students we are honor-bound to protect. Last week, I submitted a possible solution to Andy, the GEA president. My understanding is it was passed along to Dr. Pilch, and I would be happy to share it with all of you. However, if it is decided that we must move forward with the plan to return face-to-face, you are all more than welcome to come help me figure out how to socially distance my kids in my classroom. Thank you for your time.
Yes. Good job.
Thank you, Ms. Knuckle. Our next speaker is Ms. Karen Wayne-Scott on the subject of return to school.
My name is Karen, a District 6 parent, active school volunteer, and two-time former employee. I'm also the quiet Wayne-Scott. I was a certified special education substitute teacher in one of your elementary schools this past year. I also created a community-funded dance club for the past 2 years and taught yoga to students and at parent events. In early March, I contracted COVID from 2 students I was supporting ongoing as a regular sub. The 2 hellish weeks that followed are not something I would wish on anyone, nor would I the chronic cough I now have or the 48-hour COVID relapses that I have every few weeks. I'm absolutely terrified when I think about the potential long-term damage to my heart, lungs, and kidneys. Now I'm petrified that my husband and 2 children could face that themselves or worse. My email address should be in your database 3 times. I've sat in enough parent-teacher conferences, employee orientations, and filled out the volunteer background check forms that it should be well up to date. I did not receive email 1 from this district about its plan and was never asked to fill out the oh so important survey in May. The first communication I did receive from the school district was a sudden flood of emails and text messages pressuring me to commit to returning as a sub before the first town hall meeting was ever held. When I responded to HR to let them know that I had gotten sick last school year and I had concerns, I received the only words from the district anyone has still said to me to this day. Literally 7 of them exactly. That is all we needed to know. Not even attempted basic email etiquette. You might imagine what that would have felt like to read. All I needed to know was that I was not being heard or taken seriously, so I did finally click the radio button that no, I will not be returning this year. Let me be clear. I'm extremely frustrated that this school district continues to show me time and time again that I don't matter. But what's far scarier than not being respected as a professional and as a parent is that no one seems to think the risk to my children and the rest of our family matters much either. You throw out these numbers and risk management strategies as if they're theoretical. What will you do now that someone has actually stood before you and informed you that yes, I got sick in a school, and no, I do not think this plan is safe? I wish you would have asked me. If you're not going to ask me, or the substitutes, volunteers, and parents like me, then at least ask yourself, would you be willing to trade places with me? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Wainscott. Our next speaker is Mr. Tyler Bliss on the return plan. Mr. Bliss, you'll have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Tyler Bliss. I went to Montfort Elementary, Heath Middle School, University High School, and Ames Diploma Program. I didn't like school, and I didn't do well in that traditional sense. I took a different path to get to my education. I can only imagine what other students are going to be going through during this pandemic. I can only imagine how hard it will be for students like me. Then adding all these restrictions is definitely going to push these kids like me over the edge and ensure that they do not like school. It took me years to figure out what I wanted for my life, and I'm still trying to figure out that to this day. One school year is a small but serious time in a person's life. With the rest of my time, I'd like to read something. North Paulding High School sophomore Hannah Waters, who shared a photo of the crowded hallways in her school, has received threats over her release of that photo. One message said, quote, "I know where this girl lives." Other threats she said included were, quote, "We're going to jump every girl named Hannah in the 10th grade. Hannah is going to have a rough day at school on Monday." Quote, "I feel like a lot of teachers have my back because they know how dangerous it is going to be at school. But I know that a lot of the kids that I go to school with, and I've already gotten backlash for it, threats and things like that," Hannah says. "I know I'm doing the right thing, and it's not going to stop me from continuing to do it. But it's concerning, especially since it's a lot of people I go to school with, people I've known for years, now threatening me. School is rough. Thank you for thinking of us all."
Thank you, Mr. Bliss. Our next speaker is Jessica, is it Piney? Penny. I'm sorry. Ms. Penny, you will have 2 minutes as well.
Good evening. Thank you, members of this team and those in our schools working tirelessly to support the implementation of the safest return to school. My name is Jessica, I'm D6, and I'm really nervous. I'm really nervous, Mr. Havely.
Thank you.
As a parent, I hope to provide perspective of one of the 70% of the families that you are concerned about. My goal is to partner with this institution to increase transparency for families, employ more creative problem solving now, and advocate for parent voice in the two-way conversations you keep mentioning. I stand here as one, but I know many parents with concerns are home making dinner, they're heading off to their shift, or they're managing a child's tantrum. I stand here for them. Some are scared to talk to you, like me. Some are told that they don't feel that they belong here because they didn't even belong at school. And some are really scared because people aren't very nice online. I'll use a quote from the Greeley Trib today. Teachers have no spine. Does that mean that I have no spine because I'm keeping my child home? Concerns with the recent data that was expressed today by Dr. Kranagi, is that how you say her name? Is that the 20 to 59-year-old with a 33-year-old median is a concern right now. That is the heart of parents. That's their age. You take out a parent, you take out a child's ability to be a healthy learner. Healthy learners need healthy parents, and they need healthy teachers. So I'm hoping that our district will solve problems for food, internet, scarcity for supervision now. Let's not wait 2 months after we do a survey. Let's start solving those today. I want to know if we're earmarking budget for when remote happens. Are we earmarking budget to help train staff to train parents? And I also just want to bring to your attention that 60% of Weld County accesses childcare through friend, family, and neighbor care. Friends and family and neighbors, if they get sick, cannot provide that emergency care that we need for those children. You are cutting off a lifeline resource if they get sick. Or that resource will say, no, I won't watch your children because I don't want to get sick. And families, that critical resource becomes split. Don't cut families off at the knees. So my last thing that I want to say, even though I have so much, is that we need to know that the quality of D6 lives matters too. Not just, oh, well, they might not end up dead, but will they have a quality of life? Those teachers, that staff, that person that they accidentally gave it to in the grocery store. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Penny. Our next speaker is Ms. Sally Reed. And I don't think I've said this yet, but I should. We don't respond to any speaker comments, though you may get some feedback from administration as you exit. But just so everyone knows that. Thank you. And you'll have 2 minutes, Ms. Reed.
Hi, I'm Sally Reed, and I teach CLD. I've been in the district for about 20 years. And this summer I had the great opportunity to deliver food to some of our refugee families who have single mothers, and they're working and they don't have a car. And so many of the people that are speaking tonight, other people from my school and other schools, delivered the food to their houses. When I did that, I saw families, stair steps of kids, and kids sitting on the porch, older adults, lots of different generations. I saw that in an instant. And so I've been very concerned about the contact tracing for the district, particularly for the families and the kids that I have had the privilege of teaching. And so I called the Weld County Health Department today and talked to them about some of my concerns, and they are that these parents or parent will often not answer the phone. Obviously, there's a language issue. We talked about what they were using for the language translation, that when we taught them remotely, we had a hard time getting a hold of them through the telephone, and that we used something called WhatsApp to get a hold of them when nothing else would work. And we discussed another issue, which is transportation. If they do set up another testing site for these families, where would that be and how would they handle transportation? And so I would like to know, more how is that going to work in going back to school, because I'm very concerned about everyone. I know that where these people work and how they live in their households and the translation and the transportation is an issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Kimberly Foster. Thank you, Ms. Foster. You'll have 2 minutes as well.
Thank you, Dr. Pilch and the board, and my husband Mario, and everyone else is here to support us. Last time I was here, I was with Lucky Luciano. He talked to you about our care closet at Maplewood and about our family at Maplewood and how we take care of one another. I have a lot to say. I could quote numbers and I could talk about the science. But for me right now, I just want to say that I'm concerned about going back to school in person with my students. I'm concerned for their lives and our lives. And I know this is a huge beyond my scope. I listen to it every day. I study every day. I love my children. I love my kids. And we all do. And I'm concerned, as you all are, that this is not safe. And I understand that there's an economic portion of this potentially. I'm just asking you to review again the safety of it. Why can we not, with our technology, do what we can do remotely and not put anybody's lives at risk? I'm a teacher. I can tell you right now, I can send you videos of students that have said, I want to go back to school. Why can't we take CSAP or CMAS from last year? We need to just think about this seriously. Obviously you have. I'm just asking you not to send us back to school with kids in person. We don't even have enough space in our classrooms to space like we are here. 6 foot by 6 foot. We cannot do it safely. 2 times a day my kids are going to be taking their masks off to eat breakfast and lunch. How is that safe? How is that protocol? You're wearing masks. You're 6 feet away from each other. I don't have that luxury, and more importantly, neither do my students. I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Foster. Our next speaker is Mr. Josh Wainscott, also on the subject of reopening plan. Mr. Wainscott, you have 2 minutes. Yeah.
I do want to say that this will be longer than 2 minutes, and I do want to make sure that people's voices get heard. So if Don and Pat would like to go ahead of me, I'm perfectly okay with that, because I'd like you to have the ability to walk away. I don't want you to have to suffer through this unless you choose to. So I'm going to ask
Mr. Wainscott, you have 2 minutes. That's all you can have. We have to give equal time to everybody.
Like I said, that's why I'm hoping that if they would like to be able to go first, they're more than welcome to.
Mr. Gates, if necessary, we'll need to remove Mr. Wainscott if he won't adhere to the expectations of the Board of
Thank you,
Education.
sir.
I'm sorry to have to do that, but
Nope.
that's what we'll need to do.
That's all right. I understand. So, I've been struggling with this topic and ways to approach it for the last week and a half, and I needed some clarity, so I went to talk with my parents. My dad told me to keep the passion but lose the emotion. My mom told me to be polite and not to finger point. This is great advice, and starting Monday, I'm not going to get it anymore because we'll be going back live in person. And my dad is immunocompromised, and I don't want to kill him. I have 3 things that I'd like to share with you this evening. 1, the reasons why we're asking for your input. 2, why we need to be focusing on the community with our plan and actions, not just our school procedures. And 3, my position as a parent. I want to start by saying why I believe that I'm an expert in this field. I have an AA from Ames. I have a bachelor's from UNC. I have a master's from UNC. I have an educational specialist degree from UNC. I was a community specialist. I was married in Greeley twice, even at Centennial Village. My favorite chicken comes from my friend Rosna's house, and I know that my favorite goat comes from Miriam and Muhammad Willie, and I know that the best Mexican food is homemade because it's made with love. I know that how to get a green arrow, and I know what flashing yellow and flashing red means. I know where the trailer parks are. I know where Hillen Park is, and I know that it needs its help. I know where slumlord housing is because I've lived in it. I have campaigned for MLOs. I have campaigned for bonds. I have campaigned for board members. I have campaigned for representatives, and I have campaigned for change. I know that we hate poverty, but it is needed to fuel the business industry of this town. I have watched movies in the park. I have skated at the ice house. I have splashed at the splash parks and slid down the slides at the Funplex. I have been a member of Hillside, and I've donated to the Ark.
Mr. Wayne Scott,
and I have gone
I'm
to
sorry.
the Ark as well.
Your time is up.
I have helped people sign up for WIC because I've been on WIC. I know
Mr.
what
Wayne Scott.
CCP is, and I know what CHP Plus is, and I know what Latchkey is, and I know that there's no law about it.
Thank you, Mr.
I
Wayne
know
Scott.
what you're going to have to do, and I'm going to keep talking. So
Don't make a scene, okay? Come on, you're not monitoring.
I know, I know, and I appreciate it.
Josh, will you please just provide a closing comment?
President of the board's in charge.
I know.
Please.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, board, for listening, and I hope you take our comments seriously. Thanks, John. I appreciate all your time.
Thank you, Mr. Wayne Scott. Our next speaker is Mr. Don Pearl. Mr. Pearl, you'll also have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Don Pearl. I'm a retiree from District 6, 20 years there, 16 years at UNC, 1 year at the Immigration and Refugee Center where I was a volunteer, and would hope to go back there once that is safe. And that's really what I want to talk to you about, as everybody else is wanting to talk to you about as well. We're in a serious dilemma here, as you all know. What are we going to do when there is so much unknown and the stakes are so perilously high? What are we to do? To open? And if so, how? And how can we be safest? What training should we all go through to minimize the risks and take care of each other and ourselves too? It's overwhelming. One of the things that came to my mind is how many children are on free and reduced lunch. I think it's something like 65%. I might have that wrong. But anyway, if the schools don't open, what are we going to do with those children? It seems to me in this very rich nation, this incredibly wealthy nation, we could figure out a way whereby food could be distributed to these children who are on free and reduced lunch. I want to tell you, frankly, I am terrified. How do we keep each other safe? Also, there's this thing about cooperative education. Children learn best when they are together, and they are by nature wanting to be together. No matter what protocols we come up with, children are going to surprise us when they go off script, and they're always going to go off script. Okay. I'll bet you we've all seen going viral the halls of that school, a high school in Georgia, where all those young people, emerging adults, are crowded together without masks. What a recipe for disaster. So I'm going to conclude here with something I read that Hubert Humphrey said. Hubert Humphrey was a senator from Minnesota, and he was Lyndon Johnson's vice president. I think this is so valuable. The moral test of government is how that government treats those who are in the dawn of life, our children, those who are in the twilight of life, the elderly, and those who are in the shadows of life, the sick, the needy, the handicapped. Let us have them foremost in our minds. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pearl. Our next speaker is Miss Pat Califona. Ms. California, you also have 2 minutes in which to speak.
Thank you. Thanks for allowing me to be able to speak to you. I appreciate you all for being on our school board. And I just have a few things to say. A lot of people think that students are not going to get the virus. I want to point out that according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, there have been 100,000 students that have contracted it just in the last 2 weeks of July. There's so much we don't know. There's an article in that in Market Watch that 55% of coronavirus patients still have neurological problems 3 months later, and we don't know the long-term damage that is going to happen. I know I'm very attuned to brain injuries. My husband died of a traumatic brain injury, and so I'm really concerned about the health of our people's brains. It's kind of a basic to education. And so hopefully you'll take it all, take their safety as the utmost importance. There's also, you may have heard of multisystem inflammatory system syndrome in children. They abbreviate MISC, and there's been correlations between that and COVID-19. It's a syndrome in children, is a condition where different body parts can become inflamed, including heart, lungs, kidneys, brain, skin, eyes, or gastrointestinal organs. Children with this may have a fever, various symptoms, etc. And we don't know what causes it, but many children with this syndrome had the virus that causes COVID-19 or have been somewhere around someone with it. Anyway, I just want to be very careful because we don't know the long-term effects, and I don't want our children or our teachers to be lab rats. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Califona. I think those are all the speakers that we have tonight for the first portion of our public participation. So now we'll proceed to the work session report. So Ms. Crane, will you give us an update on our work session?
Of course, we have had 4 work sessions since we met last in a business meeting, so I will very briefly review the 4. June 22nd, 2020, Board of Education President Michael Matthews began the work session with comments and updates from board members and then proceeded to review the calendar of upcoming events and meeting dates, including a discussion about graduation ceremonies. Superintendent Dr. Deirdre Pilch and Chief Security Officer John Gates provided an update on the role of school resource officers in District 6. The board briefly discussed community engagement and debriefed the work session to conclude. August 3rd, 2020. Board of Education President Michael Matthews began the work session with comments and updates from board members. Superintendent Dr. Deirdre Pilch provided an update on the 2020-2021 reopening plans and heard questions and comments from board members. The board briefly debriefed the work session to conclude. August 7th, 2020. Board of Education President Michael Matthews began the work session with comments and updates from board members. Superintendent Dr. Deirdre Pilch provided an update on the 2020-2021 reopening plans and heard questions and comments from board members. The discussion of board priorities for the 2020-2021 school year was postponed. The board briefly debriefed the work session to conclude. In this evening's work session, just before our business meeting, August 10th, 2020, Board of Education President Michael Matthews began the work session with comments and updates from board members and then proceeded to review the calendar of upcoming events and meeting dates. The board heard a presentation from the Weld County Department of Public Health and Environment. Superintendent Dr. Deirdre Pilch provided an update on the 2020-2021 reopening plans and heard questions and comments from board members. The board briefly debriefed the work session to conclude. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crane. That was a lot of work sessions. Our next item is our superintendent's report. So Dr. Pilch, I will give it over to you.
Thank you, President Matthews and members of the board. You know, I know we don't usually address our public speakers, but I feel compelled and I'm going to take liberty. You know, I am really sorry that we have folks who are scared about this decision. And as I told you earlier tonight, I know we have people who are genuinely fearful. You know, we had 10 people stand before us tonight who spoke about concerns with us reopening. Half of them, 5 of them, were teachers currently in our district, teachers who we care about deeply, who we've been in their classrooms. You all have been in some of those teachers' classrooms, and I know you have relationships outside of this work with some of those teachers who came before us tonight. And we have a few community members who stood in front of us who care about our teachers, who care about our students, who care about us, and are concerned about opening and the unknowns. I know for me, it was difficult to hear the concerns tonight, and I appreciate the folks coming forward and sharing them. I think we have to have all the information that is out there, and as much information as we can as we consider this decision. We have made this decision. My team and I have made the plans that we have presented with you all over several weeks of work based on the best recommendation we can get from health officials throughout Colorado, in the Denver metro area as well as here in northern Colorado. And I'm not a health expert. I'm not a physician. And so I have to look to the health officials and the health experts to guide us and to guide our decision making and to make sure that we're putting as strong a plans in place as we can to support learning in our community. Some of the speakers tonight spoke about economics and us being worried about the economics of doing this. There's no economic gain or benefit depending on our model. We would still be fully funded on students even if they were all remote. So I just want to be clear, it's actually probably costing us more to implement the model we're doing now than if we'd gone fully remote. We've added additional teachers for online to support online work. We've added staff and literally spent millions of dollars on equipment and supplies and materials to be able to open safely. You'll see tonight in the agenda almost a $750,000 contract in the consent agenda for additional Chromebooks, because one of our Chromebook orders is held up and is not going to be here. So we worked with another vendor to get Chromebooks here as quickly as we can so we can move to our blended learning model as soon as possible. You'll see a contract in there tonight for Ellen air purifying systems. These are HEPA purification systems that we will have in every classroom, in every conference space, in every office, to try the best we can to purify the air. You saw the data earlier tonight in our work session on lowering class size as much as we can to keep students at a physical distance. Today we worked with principals on plans around teachers who will be in more classrooms than the one individual homeroom teacher, and to make sure that those staff are wearing face shields as well as the mask because they're going into multiple classrooms. And I know, and you all know, there's no guarantee. There is no guarantee that someone is not going to get sick, and maybe very, very sick. So I am committed to the belief of the importance of having our children with us for public education. And that, as the American Association of Pediatrics has advised, that there's far more benefit in having our students in-person learning with us than there is at having them at home. And so I know you don't vote tonight on this, and I also know that if any of you had concerns, additional concerns that we haven't discussed about going forward, that you will share those with me. I do appreciate the staff and the community voice tonight, and I don't think it's resounding. I don't think it is resounding in our community, and we have nearly 2,700 employees in our district, and I think most of those employees are prepared and ready to come back and are getting their routines and pieces into place. And unless we have new data that tells us we're not going in the right direction in terms of managing this virus in our community, and new data that tells us that children are safer at home, especially young children are safer at home than they are with us, I have to stand by my recommendation and know that, yes, we have staff who are fearful, we have to figure that out. And I especially appreciate the first presenter who spoke about, April, I think it is, who spoke about being ready to work with children around the stress and grief and anxiety related to COVID, and she's right. And we do have those plans in place, and we have to have the support there for the classroom teacher, so the classroom teacher does not feel that tremendous pressure of being that grief counselor while also being the classroom teacher. So we'll be certain to have those pieces in place, and I truly appreciate those comments. I'm sorry we didn't get to hear the rest of Mr. Wayne Scott's comments. I wonder if perhaps he'll share those with us as they were written, and maybe he'll forward those to us. But we have to honor the process of limiting the amount of time our speakers speak so that everybody gets a voice and everybody gets to be heard. So we'll follow up with Mr. Wayne Scott after tonight. So with that, I think I don't think I need to say anything else about this or about what we have coming. I'm excited to welcome teachers and students back and other staff back. And I got to speak today with all of the nutrition services staff. They were in, I think, 18 different locations in cohorts of 11 people in each cohort, spaced out, and we did a Zoom meeting with all of them, and I'm excited to welcome them back and to see their deep dedication to coming back and making sure that we've got cafeteria folks to be able to, nutrition services folks to be able to be certain that our students are fed. And so welcome back to everybody, and thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pilch. Yeah, I will take issue with one thing that was said, a quote from a paper that said teachers didn't have spine. That didn't come from anybody up here. We know that our teachers are incredible, and they have incredible courage. And so I don't know who wrote that in the Greeley Tribune, but they don't know what they're talking about. Our next item is to approve our agenda for tonight. So this is an action item, and it will require a motion.
I move that the Board of Education of Greeley-Evans School District 6 approves the agenda as presented.
Second.
Thank you both. Is there any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, Ms. Crane, will you give us a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Hafley?
Aye.
Mrs. Mash?
Aye.
Mr. Matthews?
Aye.
Mrs. Mueller?
Aye.
Ms. Pappas?
Aye.
Mrs. Solis?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Ms. Mash, or Ms. Crane. The next item is the approval of our consent agenda. And this is also an action item, and we'll need a motion to proceed.
I move that the Board of Education of Greeley-Evans School District 6 approves items as presented on the consent agenda and authorizes the officers to sign any and all contracts.
Second.
Thank you both. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, Ms. Crane, will you give us a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Hafley?
Aye.
Mrs. Mash?
Aye.
Mr. Matthews?
Aye.
Mrs. Mueller?
Aye.
Ms. Pappas?
Aye.
Mrs. Solis?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Ms. Crane. Our next item is a resolution to define actively engaged in the educational process and student attendance for 2020-21 school year. And this is an action item that also needs a motion to proceed.
I move that the Board of Education of Greeley-Evans School District 6 approves the resolution to define actively engaged in the educational process and student attendance for the 2020-2021 school year as presented.
Second.
Thank you both. Before we go any further, and we'll get Dr. Pilch to give us some explanation, would somebody be so kind as to read this resolution for us?
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Talley.
Resolution to define actively engaged in the educational process and student attendance for the 2020-2021 school year. Whereas on March 11, 2020, the World Health Organization, WHO, characterized COVID-19 as a pandemic, meaning the WHO identified the worldwide spread of a new disease, and whereas on March 10, 2020, Governor Jared Polis declared a state of emergency and issued Executive Order D 2020-003 on March 11th, 2020 as a safeguard against the further spread of COVID-19. And whereas on July 6, 2020, Governor Jared Polis amended and extended Executive Order D 2020-003 through Executive Order D 2020-125. And whereas under Colorado Constitution, Article 9, I think that's Chapter 15, the local Board of Education has control of instruction in its public schools, and whereas, as required by 1 CCR 301-39, the Board of Education defines educational process in Board Policy IC/ICA, school year, school calendar, instruction time. And whereas the Board of Education finds that the current pandemic creates the need for changes to instructional delivery and in the situations under which students are considered in attendance. And whereas the Colorado Department of Education provided guidance specific for the 2020-2021 school year, stating local boards may define the educational process as including instruction delivered electronically and or other types of independent remote work time for students that is provided under the supervision of a certified or licensed teacher. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education of Greeley Evans School District 6 authorizes the following for the 2020-2021 school year. 1. Expansion of the definition of actively engaged in the educational process addressed in Board Policy IC/ICA, school year, school calendar, instructional time to include instruction delivered electronically and or the use of other types of independent remote work time for students provided under the supervision of a certified or licensed teacher. Attendance. 2. Attendance will be recorded at least once daily in the district's student information system for days when instructional hours are provided, meaning a student is actively engaged in the educational process. 3. Student contact days may include remote learning days implemented as a result of public health and safety measures. Remote learning days may include use of Schoology, video conferencing, various digital curriculum resources, assigned and prepared work packets, pre-recorded classes, and other methods utilized by the district. Teacher-pupil instruction and contact time may occur in the following ways. A. Presence during in-person instruction. B. Presence during virtual instruction via video conferencing or recorded lessons. C. Assignments completed at home. D. Logging into the online learning platform. E. Logging into digital content applications. F. Signing on online form attesting to work completed at home. G. Student demonstration of learning. H. Responding to teacher emails or communication. Or I. Other means as determined by the school and or teacher. Now therefore, be it further resolved that the district will make a good faith effort to ensure that the combination of in-person and or remote learning implemented during the year allows students to learn the same academic content as they would have learned under the in-person bell schedule. Now be it further resolved that the superintendent is directed to keep the Board of Education informed of actions under this resolution. Now be it further resolved, this resolution is in effect for the duration of the 2020-2021 school year unless otherwise rescinded or extended by the board upon a 2/3 majority vote. Now be it further resolved, the execution of this resolution is conclusive evidence of the board's approval of this action and of the authority granted herein, adopted and approved this 10th day of August 2020. Holy man.
Nice job, Mr. Talley. Thank you. Dr. Pilch, I think that's relatively self-explanatory, but is there any information you would like to give us in addition to that?
I think Mr. Talley did a great job. The only thing additional that I would add is that this is a recommendation from CASB that boards of education approve these resolutions rather than changing our board policy on what counts for regular attendance, recognizing that this is an unusual circumstance that we're in with moving part of our students to online, but not to an actual online school, and having some students in a hybrid model, and knowing that we may have to access either or both as we go forward for the school year.
Thank you, Dr. Pilch. We'll now have questions and comments from board members if there are any. Okay, I don't see any. So, Ms. Mesh, do you have one?
No.
Okay. Ms. Crane, will you give us a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Mr. Hafley?
Aye.
Mrs. Mash?
Aye.
Mr. Matthews?
Aye.
Mrs. Mueller?
Aye.
Ms. Pappas?
Aye.
Mrs. Solis?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye, sorry.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Ms. Crane. The next item is a first read of policy GBAB, workplace health and safety protection. Because this is a first read, we don't need to take any action on this item tonight. But Dr. Pilch, will you give us a brief explanation of why this policy needs to be changed?
Yes, and if I may, I'd actually like to talk about both item 8.02 and 8.03 as they are related.
That would be great.
Thank you. So both of these are first reads of policies, both as a result of this pandemic in the state of Colorado and in the nation. Both are recommended from the Colorado School Boards Association as we align with new practices related to addressing the pandemic, COVID-19.
All right, thank you, Dr. Pilch. Are there any questions, comments from board members on the first read of policy GBAB? Seeing none, we'll move on to the first read of policy JII, student concerns, complaints, and grievances. And Dr. Pilch has already given us some information around this one. Are there any comments or questions from board members on policy JII? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the first read of policy JLCC, communicable infectious diseases. Any comments or questions from board members? Seeing none, we will move on to first read of regulation ACR2, sex-based discrimination and sexual harassment investigation procedures. Dr. Pilch, did you want to say anything on this one?
I do. Thank you,
Okay.
President Matthews. This is a new regulation that does require board approval for us to implement. So it's our new practices around investigations around sex-based discrimination and sexual harassment. This regulation relates both to the revisions that you will see coming in the J student policies and in item 8.06, the revisions to the AC non-discrimination equal opportunity policy and regulation. So they're related to one another.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Pilch. Any questions or comments from board members? All right. Well, we'll move on to revisions to the J student policies. And this is an action item, so we will need a motion to proceed.
I move that the Board of Education of Greeley Evans School District 6 revises the J students policies as presented.
Second.
Thank you both. Dr. Pilch, would you like to give us a summation of this one?
Thank you, President Matthews. JBB, the sexual harassment policy, is recommended for revision in alignment with new federal and state requirements and relates back to the first read of regulation AC-R2, which you won't consider for approval till the next board meeting. And then the student absences and excuses is really a cleanup based on recommendations from the Colorado School Boards Association, just getting more current language into that policy.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Pilch. Any questions from board members? All right. Seeing none, Ms. Crane, will you give us a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Hafley?
Aye.
Mrs. Mash?
Aye.
Mr. Matthews?
Aye.
Mrs. Mueller?
Aye.
Ms. Pappas?
Aye.
Mrs. Solis?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Ms. Crane. Our next item of business are the revisions to our AC non-discrimination equal opportunity policy and regulation. This is also an action item.
I move that the Board of Education of Greeley Evans School District 6 approves revisions to the AC non-discrimination equal opportunity policy and regulation as presented.
Second.
Thank you both. Dr. Pilch, any comments on this one before we get comments and questions from board members?
Thank you, President Matthews. We just revised this policy last January prior to the legislative session, and then these are new revisions as recommended by the Colorado School Boards Association, primarily moving language that was shall to must, requiring what we must do in relation to this policy. I'm happy to take questions if you have any.
Okay. Any questions or comments from board members? Seeing none, Ms. Crane, will you give us a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Hafley?
Aye.
Mrs. Mash?
Aye.
Mr. Matthews?
Aye.
Mrs. Mueller?
Aye.
Ms. Pappas?
Aye.
Mrs. Solis?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Ms. Green. The next item of business are our revisions to policy EBBA, prevention of disease, infection transmission, handling body fluids. This is an action item, so we'll need a motion.
I move that the Board of Education of Greeley Evans School District 6 approves revisions to policy EBBA, prevention of disease, infection transmission, handling body fluids as presented.
Second.
Thank you both. I think this is another one that changes a lot of shalls to wills and must. Is there anything else we need to know about it, Dr. Pelch? Okay. Any other questions about changing our shalls to wills and musts? All right. Seeing none from our fellow board members, Ms. Crane, will you give us a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Hafley?
Aye.
Mrs. Mash?
Aye.
Mr. Matthews?
Aye.
Ms. Mueller?
Aye.
Ms. Pappas?
Aye.
Mrs. Solis?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Ms. Crane. The next item of business are the revisions to policies GBGA, staff health and medical examination requirements. This is an action item that requires a motion.
I move that the Board of Education of Greeley Evans School District 6 approves revisions to policy GBGA, staff health and medical examination requirements as presented.
Second.
Thank you both. Dr. Pilch, some more shalls moving to wills and must. Anything else?
What you're seeing here is districts being asked to have stronger language in their policies around their actions related to health and safety, and I presume most of it is a result of us being in a pandemic. The other piece here is you'll notice that we just revised this policy last February. At that time, we cleaned the language up and really improved upon the policy by recommendations. But the School Boards Association is asking us to go a bit stronger with this language as well as the previous two policies.
Okay. We do have a question from Mr. Hafley.
We talked about on Friday that we can't ask people to be tested for COVID. Is testing for COVID the same as a medical examination, or are they defined differently?
So typically we would look at medical examination when we're talking about a fit for duty.
Okay.
So that's the difference. I suppose we could go down a fit for duty and say you have to have a COVID test to prove you're fit for duty, but we likely will not go there. We don't want to infringe on people's civil liberties.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Mash, you also have a question.
Well, I was just going to point out for, I guess, a clarification. I think in the previous one that we're not voting on, it does say that we may require a doctor's note to return to work after an illness. So
yeah, we've always had that ability, is to require a doctor's note for absence or to return. So there you go.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Ms. Crane, will you give us a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Hafley?
Aye.
Mrs. Mash?
Aye.
Mr. Matthews?
Aye.
Mrs. Mueller?
Aye.
Ms. Pappas?
Aye.
Mrs. Solis?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Ms. Crane. Our next item of business are the revisions to policies KI visitors to schools.
I move. Sorry.
Oh, go.
Jump with the gun. I move that the Board of Education of Greeley Evans School District 6 approves revision to the policy KI visitors to schools as presented.
Second.
Thank you both. Dr. Pilch, a few more shalls becoming wills and musts. Anything else we need to know?
Well, and the other is just adding the word health and safety, which is a result of the environment we're currently working in.
Okay. Mr. Talley, did you have a question?
No, sorry.
Sorry. Any other questions or comments from board members? All right. Seeing none, Ms. Crane, will you give us another roll call vote, please?
Mr. Hafley?
Aye.
Mrs. Mash?
Aye.
Mr. Matthews?
Aye.
Mrs. Mueller?
Aye.
Ms. Pappas?
Aye.
Mrs. Solis?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Ms. Crane. I do believe those are all of our policy revisions tonight. So our next item of business are those public participation comments regarding non-agenda items. And we do have someone here tonight to speak to us, not on a topic that we're discussing tonight. And so I think Ms. Patricia Nelson is here to speak with us tonight. Ms. Nelson, you will have 2 minutes, and I will just, as I did remind the other group, that this board's committed to providing a safe environment where all members of the school community are treated with dignity and respect, and expects all of our speakers to exercise their speech rights responsibly. So,
thank you. So my name is Patricia Nelson. My son is a student at Bella Romero Academy, and I've been following a lot what's been going on because I've had a lot of community members in my network asking me for answers. And a lot of the time, those are answers that I don't feel comfortable answering, simply because a lot of these friends of mine are sending their kids back to school, and I'm going to keep my kid home. So I don't feel comfortable answering questions about what's going to happen at school. And so I know Dr. Pilch spoke about there's a lot of families that are getting a lot of communications, but I just wanted to bring up the topic of the families that are not being communicated to. I'd like to remind you all that there are community members that don't have access to the internet, they don't have smartphones, they don't have Facebook, so they don't text. And so Mr. Talley brought up a great point about if we're going to talk about problems, let's talk about the solutions. And so a couple suggestions that I've been thinking about is maybe you guys can collaborate with community groups, religious groups, or other organizations that cater specifically to non-English speaking communities in our community. And I was thinking maybe even printing up a newsletter and posting it at a lot of the little shops around town, like the Tarahumara or the Comales. We have a lot of community members that do go there, and those are a lot of community members. Like I said, they don't have, I know so many people that still use flip phones. And so I think that'd be a great way to communicate all of the happenings that are happening with right now, and there's so many things that are changing. In fact, I had a mom text me right before this meeting asking me about in-school learning, and again, I don't feel comfortable answering those questions. And I also wanted to remind the school board that as elected officials who use their personal Facebooks in their official capacities, there have been many courts that have ruled in many states across the United States that blocking constituents on Facebook is a violation of First Amendment rights. Thank you.
thank you, Ms. Nelson. I do believe we have one other speaker, Ms. Therese Gilbert, who would like to speak to us tonight. And like everyone else, Ms. Gilbert, you will have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you tonight to talk to the board. I came down here to support some of my friends who talked earlier, but I just wanted to share my thinking on this as someone in the classroom who went last week and saw the deliberate preparation that the admin at my school had done to get all the protocols down, from water bottles to hand washing to exiting the room, to the unbelievable amount of work that went in over the summer to get us ready to go. I had a lot of trepidations. I had the same worries. I know this school board, a couple of you were exemplary teachers. I'm sure you would have been figuring out, oh God, how am I going to do this, But then on curriculum day, when I saw that CLD supports were already in place for when we go remote, this was very assuring. It's not going to be perfect, but I do understand that we're starting because we're prepared. Other school districts aren't. We are prepared. We are ready if we have to go remote. We're not going to let these kids fall through the cracks. We won't. It will be harder, but it will get done. And I just really appreciate the amount of attention that this school board has put into it. I know you take it seriously. As an elected body, I trust you the most. The only things, and I know Dr. Pilch, you're putting in 18-hour days, and those aren't going to stop. They go all the way through the year, because this is going to be hard. It will be hard, but we will do it. I understand we need to be in person for as long as possible. That should be our goal. These kids need to come back to school. If anything, I would ask, and it's beyond your capacity, I know, somehow to get testing on a quicker turnaround if teachers need a test. And somehow to get information on our site that's just good, strong, clear medical information in multiple languages. But again, I appreciate all the work you've done. I do think we're as ready as we're going to be. And we got to do it. We got to go back. And we want these kids to come back, and then we want to stay in the classroom with them as long as we can. And if we're careful, hopefully that will extend many weeks. Thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you, Ms. Gilbert. Well, that is all the business that we have tonight. Everyone have a wonderful Monday.
President Matthews,
Oh.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I really appreciate Ms. Nelson's comments, and so I want to share a couple things that we've done, and then I want to ask Stacy to follow up with you on a couple more things. But I want to say this, that Ann Ramirez and Teresa did go on La Tigra Radio last week. I know that we are planning a couple of events through the Family Center for parents who are Spanish speakers and other languages. So I want Stacy to share, Dr. Dougherty, to share those dates with you, Trish, if she can, before you get away tonight. Because I know you're one of the ambassadors out there sharing information and trying to help families get what they need. And then I just want to remind the board, we could not be doing what we are doing with communicating without the IRC. They have been amazing. They have translated our materials for us. They are following up with us if they're hearing concerns. They're helping families to navigate this alongside us. And I know it's never enough. There's always a lot more that we can do. And so I appreciate the suggestions and the solutions, and we'll just keep working at it. I know you guys told me, I don't know, Friday morning we met last was communicate, and that means in multiple languages and multiple ways. So we'll work hard to do that. Thank you for letting me jump in on that.
Not a problem. Thank you, Dr. Pilch. Any other? All right. This meeting is adjourned.